Hello, everyone. Before you get too comfortable, make sure that you're not sitting down at a table that is dark. Go to a table towards the center where there's light, because those are the ones with the worksheets. Also, yeah, go towards the light. Make sure you're not necessarily sitting next to all of your coworkers that you came with, because that's when you'll get the best conversations going, when you're with some new people. All right, so we're going to kick off our next session. This one is all about health scores, and it's not just any regular health score, it's a predictive health score. So you may have measures of health like usage data or engagement metrics or survey information or support tickets, sentiment. There's a lot of different ways to figure out how healthy customers are. And you may have combined them into like a red, yellow, green type thing. You may have inserted a couple other colors like lime or amber. But what we're going to talk about today with our amazing speakers is getting a little bit more predictive with that. So our two speakers are Andrew Carrick, the Senior Director of Customer Success for Asia Pacific at Diligent Corporation. And that's a New York headquartered company. They do a lot of stuff, a lot of different products that I was seeing on the website, most notably board management software. And then our very own Gainsight's head of data science, Samuel Cummings. He is very smart, as is Andrew, Yeah. Well, yeah. So let's welcome them to the stage, and they'll take it over. Everyone should have worksheets. I'm going to go around and make sure that each table has enough. But thank you, and welcome to the stage.
Hello, hello.
Good afternoon.
So this started off, he's the cool one, so to be clear, all right?
He's the smart one.
So teamwork here, huh? How's everyone doing? All right, that sounded good. I'm gonna say it again. How's everyone doing? Okay, now we got it ready. So today we're gonna talk about predictive scoring. You guys know the format, right? We're gonna give a little bit of presentation, jump right into an activity, and then ultimately bring those findings together. So there's gonna be a lot of collaboration throughout this engagement, and we're gonna hopefully have some fun. So starting off, just give you a little bit about myself. I actually came into tech a little non-traditionally. I've been trained since a child. So when I was a kid, I used to play these video games named Age of Empires, one of them. Anybody heard of it, Age of Empires? Hey, that's great. So I used to compete in these tournaments where you would build AI to make it so for those who don't know, it's a video game where you chop wood, you mine gold, you build a civilization. And I was the only child, technically. I have 5 brothers and sisters, but I was so far removed that I pretty much was by myself. So I was 10 years removed from my closest sister. So I had a lot of free time just hanging out in front of the computer. So what I did was I built AI to really make the game play it for me. And so it started off like, okay, I'm tired of chopping wood all day, and let me just have it auto chop the wood. But it kind of took to the next step where I was like, okay, I'm tired of going to war every day, you know, hard work. So then I decided, okay, let me just make it go to war for me. So step after step, I ended up building these complex AIs, and I found other kids that did it, and we would compete in these tournaments. So I learned a lot about what I do today in rule-based intelligence as a child. And then another part of it was I used to play sports games like Madden and NBA 2K. And the key thing was you're leading teams from season to season, and you're managing players. That's customer success management. So as a child, I've been prepped to do this, and it's really exciting to see how the things that I did as a kid, you know, just sitting in front of a computer having fun, became my lifestyle and the way I actually earn a living today. So again, I now head data science at Gainsight, you know, and one of the key things is I have the pleasure to be on stage with Andrew here. Hey.
Mine's a little bit more one-dimensional. So I'm a deeply religious man, but not in the traditional sense. My religion is barbecuing, and more specifically over charcoal. Much to my wife's pleasure, I've now got 5 Webers within our small terrace house. And she really is enjoying the fact that I'm talking about potentially getting the 6th. I do have an Instagram page called Sunday Slabs. It's only got about 200 followers because it's quite a specific, let's say, targeted audience. And just a heads up for any of those who follow a plant-based regime, it's probably not the one for you. In terms of my day job, I head up customer success for Diligent. Simply put, Diligent builds applications for leaders of organizations to govern more effectively. And as Lauren said, our kind of core product is a board portal product. We now have more than 1,700 clients within the Asia Pacific region. But what we're probably more proud of, and certainly to the tune of today's discussion, is our retention rate, and that's held steady at 98% over the past 7 years, or certainly since I joined Diligent. I'm going to share with you a couple of bits and pieces around Diligent's current approach to health scoring. And just a heads up, it's not anything particularly complicated or sophisticated. We are actually in the process of rolling out Gainsight right now, which will change this a little bit. But I do want to share with you what we've been doing to date. So firstly, tiering out the customers, which most of you probably have done that. I think that's important, whether you're sort of tech touch, enterprise level, whatever it may be, to get an understanding around where your kind of tier ones are. And I think it's also important, it's not just based on revenue, okay? It's also looking at who has the growth potential. We have a piece of data that we cut, which is called the smallest top 100, which basically looks at the clients by revenue in terms of what they're actually bringing in their industry, who are spending the smallest amount with Diligent, and look to kind of go after them as well. So important not to get caught out on just total ARR, because there's actually a bigger piece to it when you're tiering out clients. In terms of implementation success, so we have a survey that goes out at the end of every implementation, which also ties into our NPS. But really, again, you've heard it mentioned a couple of times today around the user experience, the actual wow moments that you're creating during that implementation are the things that are going to stick with your clients. Those are going to build the longer term relationships. Those will also be the ones who will hopefully tell you when something's up, something's gone wrong. They'll actually be pretty honest and open with you. Percentage of users trained. For us, a big part of the onboarding process as far as directors go is actually one-on-one, either face-to-face or over the phone training. And that percentage, being able to actually understand how many of them had a touch point with a Diligent CSM is super critical. And when we do occasionally have a poor implementation, I can guarantee it will always be because there's a low percentage of users that have actually been trained across that organization. NPS, and in fact we spent a little bit of time talking about that in the previous session in this room. In fact, our NPS survey went out today, and I think a few of the Diligent staff in the room, their inboxes are full of out of offices for the people who have already gone on holiday. Around meetings, so how many meetings have you had with this client over the last 12 months? And in terms of those meetings, how many of them have been executive meetings, okay? Really, really important that you've got the right people in the room. And to that point, also around value add features. So we've got a number of other things that we can add to the platform, in terms of cross-selling, upselling. How many of them have actually been enabled versus how many of them are actually being used? Our ongoing challenge is we don't track the actual usage of the directors. So we can't tell a client when they logged in, how long they logged in for, what they've actually read, because we've got considerations around discoverability and liability. But what we can see is how many of those have been enabled, and certainly whether on the administrator side they are utilizing them. Number of paid features, a bit of an extension to that. That can also be a bit of a furphy because you might have kind of upsold them on additional things that they're actually not seeing the value on, and they could potentially churn off the back of that. So we need to be careful that just because they're stacked on paid features, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're super healthy. One thing we can see as well is site inactivity over the last 90 days, and that's a pretty clear indicator as soon as someone comes up on the radar there that we need to do something quickly. And do we actually have an executive sponsor? And if we don't, how can we actually build one? How do we find that person? Typically in our industry, it's a general counsel or a company secretary, but thinking about your industry or your product that you're actually dealing with, who is that executive sponsor? And if you don't have them, how are you actually going to seek them out? evaluating a competitor, if they're open enough to actually tell you that that's going on, obviously that's not a great sign. And cost per user is something that we also look at versus our rack rates, as well as net sales activities, similar to the paid features. Not necessarily, I mean, it's usually a good indicator, but at the same time, we might be kind of reaching a saturation point and they might be expecting some sort of commercial conversation given the growth that they've experienced. And finally, around support. So how many times have they reached out? What sort of things are they asking? Really, really important for us to understand that. Oh, I did one more, and probably one of the most important ones, CSM sentiment. So, you know, the person on the ground who's managing that account actually understands, you know, from the various touch points that they have, how is this client feeling? What, are they likely to churn? Are they likely to grow? Are they likely to partner with us on some sort of advocacy-related activity? All of that put together gives me my very detailed, sophisticated traffic light system, which I say is in the process of kind of moving, but we then have a number of different channels that we then analyze. So we have danger account reviews. Off the back of our health call notes, we actually share them out with the respective teams so people can see what happened during the course of those meetings, maybe weigh in with another opinion on how to solve a problem. That all then kicks into a different action plan.
Hey, well, data science, where does it fit in? Well, one of the key things that, you know, when you boil it down, data science means a lot of things for a lot of different people. But the thing that really you could take away from today is there are universal truths that transcend industry, business size, and type. And I'm here to share some of those with you. And so regardless of what company you are, what type, what size, what level of maturity, the types of data that you deal with will dictate the type of business you're able to build. And so what we have here is there's really two core set groupings that all these other data types roll up under. And so one of them is entity-based. So entity-based means your accounts, your contacts, the tangible things. The demographic data is the first one that we're all mostly familiar with. This is the data that you're going to be tying to everything. So whether it's tickets being created, on that ticket record, there's some ID for an individual demographic entity. So that entity might be an account. It might be a specific person or a contact. But still, it all follows this same thing. The next one will be master records. This is where most people don't really cover as much and usually run into a lot of issues when you're trying to make cross-functional analytical decisions. And that is tying these master records. Your CSM, it's an entity, it's a person. And so whenever there's a call between a customer and a person, usually in your CSMs on that call, you don't just want to flag it for the account, but you want to flag who made the call. So that's an example of where that's used. Another one would be product, any events, any tangible things that occur that are then linked to other data sources. So those two are really the core groups for entity-based items, and they will be integral in your ability to tie meaning to your other data sources. But the other data sources that we're going to talk about are time and relationship-based. These are things that occur at a point in time and actually tie the entities to the story. And so the first one that we're all probably familiar with is usage, which means logins, call time, time spent in the platform, clicks, all these things that quantify the customer's behavior in the tool. This is one of your most predictive and powerful sources. And so if you have usage and you're able to drive with it, it's one of the most easy to be able to analyze, but easy to get wrong as well. It's important with this source to really understand that the meaning is different for different user roles. The meaning is different for different parts in the life cycle. So as far as the entity, it has very complex use, but can deliver tons of value for you. The next one is engagement data. Again, these two are a part of the two most predictive types, and you'll see a little bit more shortly about what that means, but these two sources together give you a lot more indication in advance before outcomes begin to occur. And engagement data would be email campaigns, participation in events, community engagement, all the things that they're doing to say, and essentially raise their hand and say, I'm engaged. If people aren't engaged and they're not using your platform, that's a really key indicator months in advance if someone's going to churn, or even if they're using it heavily, that they're going to be a great upsell opportunity. The next set of groups are ones that are not as useful for that kind of use case, or they're not as predictive, but they do have a lot of power and a lot of strategic impact. And that's preparedness data. And this group usually is not lumped together, but when you think about it from this paradigm, you'll understand why. And that's training, onboarding, implementations, milestones in the life cycle, professional services. All these things tell you how prepared a customer is. And the reason why is they don't do professional services just for the sense of it. They're doing it for an expected outcome. So if there's issues that are occurring in that process, they're not being prepared for that outcome. So when you group all these together, what you'll find is one of the most key insights that you can get from this type of data are gaps in your business. If we find that we have to do a bunch of professional services for our enterprise customers at the 6-month mark after they've gone live, and it's all around a specific tool, maybe we need to improve our implementation process. Where's the gap in our customer experience? And that is something that, again, strategically, when you group all these together, it tells you the full story. If you keep these separate and you don't look at them as a homogeneous set, you're going to have challenges in not being able to understand where is our customer experience really experiencing most pain points and where are some opportunities for us to improve. Very similar to preparedness data, another grouping that's critical for this type of analysis is your support and case data. This will tell you things like, again, who's logged in and created a ticket, how's that severity of that ticket, what's the priority, how long has it been open. All these different dimensions help you understand the customer's gaps. And so if you look at it in isolation, it's similar to NPS, right? It tells us that if they have a lot of tickets and are having a lot of issues and bugs, again, it's a challenging experience for the customer. But when you dig deeper into it and you look at the true meaning, you're able to get tons of strategic insights. And that is, for example, if my enterprise customers are creating tons of tickets in their first 12-year mark around a certain tool, then maybe there's some gaps in that tool. Maybe we're not implementing them correctly. So when you look at the support case data and you tie it with your preparedness data, that's when you're able to truly understand where the gaps in your business are. So these two fit in that same similar category where they're useful in a tactile sense to be able to make the call to the customer when you have that code red situation and figure out, okay, what's going on. But strategically, they're one of the best groupings of data that you can use to understand where your business process should change, where your approach to delivery should improve. Now, the next two, again, these have been very valuable and very powerful in the sense that giving us more insight into the customer's perception and how they feel. But sentiment data is one of those things that, again, as you saw before, is super helpful. But as you work your way down this list, what you'll find is the ones that are closer to the bottom, they're less predictive. And it's a reason behind this. If you take a survey and you say, hey, I'm a detractor, you've already had an experience. You've already felt something. Your sentiment is already set. So now as a company, if I'm built purely on NPS, I'm always reacting by nature. If it's support tickets, again, another scenario. Once they create a ticket, something's already happened. So if your company is purely based in your business processes on surveys and support tickets, you're going to be in firefighting mode just by the nature of the data sources. And that's part of the paradigm I'm empowering you guys with today, is that the data sources that we have available will dictate the type of business we can build. And the last one here is subscription. The reason why this is the least predictive, but still super powerful, is because when they finally change their subscription, they've already occurred, made a decision, had experiences, and have done something. So from leading at the top all the way down to lagging, these data sources are together able to tell you a story. But the most critical thing you can take from this, and the most important thing is that you must tie entity data to every source. If you do not have IDs that tell you the people, the company, the product on all these different sources, when you try to make these analytical analyses, your operations team is going to have to lift mountains. Because everyone's been in that scenario where when you ask for something, and then they say, oh, I got to go back and pull the data and then retie it together and then pull it out in Excel and do a little magic and then give it back to you, and then it might not be working. All that stuff can be avoided up front if you make sure you're tying your data sources in this way. But giving you a little bit more and taking it to that next level, how does this impact my maturity? What you'll see is what I talked about before. Your ability to be proactive, predictive, informed, or reactive is really based on how much these sources drive your business. And so towards the left, as I mentioned, you have those same source types, but you see lagging, meaning those occur and give you insight. But if you're driving your business off of it, generally you're going to be saving accounts versus driving accounts. Versus to the right, the ones that are more predictive, like usage and engagement, and more proactive. What we mean by that is, if you have actual calls to actions, actual success plans built around the subscription, meaning we're going to email them and call them 120 days before their renewal. Your team can be proactive, meaning you can hedge in things before they occur. And same with preparedness. We're going to send out a CSAT survey after they onboard. These are things that you're doing to be proactive and get the insights before it becomes an issue, but still it's not quite the holy grail that's possible if you tackle the most challenging area, which is understanding usage and engagement. But as I mentioned before, support and sentiment are critical. They're super valuable. They're going to give you a lot of insight and value. But again, it's important to really use these all in context, because telling the story in silos is not customer success. Customer success is telling the story from the customer's perspective. And the only way you can do that is if you understand the customer experience in its entirety. So taking that to even the next level, to the further magnitude, how does this impact the scorecard measures we create? What you'll find is the type of scorecard measures you build in your business dictate the type of experiences and the type of ways that your customers are scored. And so on the left side, what you'll see sentiment. Usually all companies have some sense of the CSM sentiment. They have some surveys that go out to get these different roles, whether it's executive, end user, NPS, but those things are manual. And what you'll find is if those are your drivers, you're gonna have low adoption. Most of your accounts aren't gonna be scored, because what it takes is it takes a human set of energy for them to go in, flag this as a risk, or someone to go in and take out a survey. So what we find in a lot of companies, they might have a very predictive sentiment score. When the CSM says it's red, it's really red. But the problem there is they might not flag every account because they don't have enough time in the day. Say they have 200 accounts and they're working the tech touch. They might only talk to 2 or 3 of them. So it's that limiting factor that really impacts how you're able to really quantify risk. In the middle, you might have these context scores, and these ones are more automated than manual. Some of them might be semi-automated, where someone actually drives a process and then they look at a chart and flag them. But in general, this group is more automated. And the idea is these types of scorecards should give you context into those different sources I talked about before. So you should be able to see this is what their support health is. This is what their stage progression is. This is their breadth of usage. So being able to look at these within the contextual areas. But the holy grail, and where you're really going to be able to take it to the next level, is moving into step 3, which is having outcome-based scorecards. Most people work from left to right. They get a survey that's negative, then they go into the system and say, okay, well, what's going on? They start to do this essentially, looking all around, trying to figure out the noise and understand the meaning. But when you start from right to left, you categorize the customers based on your learnings. You apply some skills in data science and business analytics to figure out what is the pattern. What is the combination of context and sentiment that means churn? What is the combination of context and sentiment that means the customer wants to advocate? And once you start to understand that and you build your score around that, now you can drive right to left. You can build reports and dashboards within your system and say, who are all my upsell opportunities? And then go from there and say, okay, what is their context? Okay, now what is the sentiment? In that story, now you're able to truly understand meaning, priority, and the severity of the risk you might have in your system. So understanding that it's important to really categorize your data types and the sources that you have, understand their maturity and what they mean for your ability to be reactive versus predictive, and then fold and roll that up into your predictive scoring so that you're able to truly have sentiment, context, but also outcomes. That's what the holy grail of this is, and what will really allow you to take your business to the next level, like I've helped and worked with many companies to do. So activities, everybody ready to have some fun? Ooh, a little quiet there, huh? There we go.
Cool. I told you he was way smarter than me. All right, so we're going to do 2, and you can kind of choose which one you want to do, or you can do both if you like. The first is a code red meeting. Everybody familiar with what we mean by that? Basically, a client's reached out to you, and in this scenario, 3 months out from their renewal, you've still got 60 days or so to turn this one around. But basically, you've locked in a face-to-face meeting with them, and they've given they've given intent to cancel, but they haven't told you why. So you know 0, but they have actually said, yes, come out and meet me. We want to have a bit of a scan around what sort of questions you're going to ask, what would be your approach, and I have given you some pointers on the bottom right-hand side of that sheet. And then activity 2, particularly around what Sam's just kind of highlighted and probably put a lot more eloquently than myself. In terms of scorecard maturity, hearing what you've just heard there, what would you go back and kind of change around inside your own organizations now, knowing those different data sets and basically driving something that's more predictive? I think we'll try for 10 or 11 minutes or so, and then come back for 5 to kind of regroup on what we've found. But we'll walk around and kind of maybe shout out a couple of things that we're hearing as we work through. Cool.
Hey. Let's do it.
Testing.
Control. We have.
All right. I think we've only got about 5 minutes or so, and I don't want to eat into your 20-minute break before the next session. So we might just scout around really. What, Nick, you'd like to keep rolling? Okay. So just wanted to scout around real quickly. Firstly, on kind of activity 1, and I'll come and find you really quickly. Anybody that found something interesting or something new and exciting on their table around the Code Red meetings in terms of a different approach there? Any brave volunteers? Otherwise, I'll ask one of the diligent CSMs. No? Yep, good. Coming over. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So we're basically talking about how with, at least from our perspective on the table, most of our code reds come from customers who are trying to use the software in a certain way beyond its core basics. So I suppose just to use my example, we're a software that has 2 very basic, easy value props that everyone can pick up and use really simply. And there's sort of the additional integrations, et cetera, workflow beyond that tends to be a bit trickier. Yeah. And it's always bringing that sort of conversation back to what was your key aims in using the tools, and with this additional bit that you just kind of push a round peg through like a square hole, and should we just go back to the basics and what are the key actual drivers from the original decision? And
because that's a difficult conversation to have, right? Because you want them to grow, you want them to, get bigger and better and find other use cases for it. What's their response when you kind of push back and say, kind of pulling them back a little bit and saying that you're kind of pushing the boundaries as to what it was designed for?
So I suppose from my experience having those conversations, it's all around, this is how what we do in this sort of area, let's say the workflow tool, this is how it works. Mm-hmm. This is what we recommend as best practice. This is how we recommend you do it. Feel free to do it another way, but that's basically up to your decision. And if you're not doing it to best practice, we can't always help because that's not how we're built. And just, we're giving you, we're prescribing you how to use this. It's on you if you want to, basically.
Yeah, fair. We'll hear one more on the Code Red side of things and then switch to activity 2. Did you? No, yeah, you did, yes. Thank you.
We had a conversation about the fact that the customers bought it for a particular intended purpose. So what is it that's missing the mark in what they're doing? So can we, understand what the vision was for how they wanted to use the product, and then, why haven't we reached that? And, in terms of turning it around, how do we, turn around from where we are to where they wanted to be when they bought the product in the first place? So. Yeah.
Bring it back to basics again, kind of starting around that initial use case and what problems we were solving. Awesome. Maybe jumping across to 2, because I actually heard probably a little bit more conversation on activity 2, because a lot of people were telling me that maybe the Code Red side of things wasn't super relevant to their particular side of things. Just on the data maturity, I've got a couple of examples that I can throw, but did anybody want to talk there? Yes.
I think I work at Zendesk. Our challenge has been that it's been hard to standardize a customer health score just because of the diversity of goals that the customers I work with have. And so it's not like they're ever purchasing Zendesk, although it would seem like it, they would have a singular sort of metric or goal. Actually, they use it for a lot of different reasons, and they have lots of different ways with working with their own customers. So yeah, that's been our challenge, is trying to think about how can we organise our customer health index around those goals, and then how do we identify which goals are relevant to which customers, and then work backwards from there.
Hey, great stuff.
Cool.
Segmentation is key. So when you give these insights and when you build your health scores, it's important to take it to the level of detail at least 2 segments deep. So if you have a mobile, a web app, and these different tools, taking it to that level. But not only that, but enterprise, SMB, and mid-size. So in the idea, you're thinking my web enterprise, my web SMB, and really using that context to drive your scoring. Hope it helps.
The other 2 kind of themes that I heard come up was, one, we've got heaps of data coming through and we just don't have a useful way of kind of boiling that down into something super useful. And secondly, we've found some sort of way, but we're not actually 100% confident that that data is right. So, and I think those are some of the common things that I heard. So again, you know, as per some of the earlier speakers today, I don't think anybody's kind of nailed this yet, right, guys? And this is kind of what I love about Pulse, and particularly customer success in general, is everybody's kind of sharing. I was talking to Sam about this earlier, so happy to actually share what's going on and what their experiences are so that we can kind of collectively get to that point. And that's what, you know, I went to Pulse in New York last year, and what got me really buzzed up about it is just that sharing. And I'd encourage, you know, the remainder of the afternoon and through the drinks and those sorts of things to actually talk to other people and share those things, because that's the only way that collectively we'll get better at this. In terms of the takeaways, you've got some on the sheet there. There's some on the code red. I'm not going to go into all of them now, but I think one of the things, I did some sales training a few years ago, and this idea of dropping the rope has been something that's really changed my approach quite significantly. Actually, I think it really comes more from relationship management, actually personal relationships, when you're having an argument with someone. But the idea of going into kind of any customer-based, professional, personal sort of conversation where there's some tension or someone wants to cancel or something's going on, is to kind of level set and kind of drop that rope at the very beginning and say, hey, I want to kind of work it out as much as you do, and kind of take away the kind of sitting there straight and these kind of awkward conversations. And yeah, exactly right. I mean, it's very, the actual analogy is spot on. So that's just something that has really stuck with me, and I kind of try to practice that, and I've really spoken to the teams at Diligent a lot about that. That's it from me. Sam, did you have any closing remarks there?
Oh, wow. Thanks, everyone, for coming out. I'm going to do something really American. Can we get a selfie, everybody? There we go. Get the camera working here. My phone's like, no, don't do it. Here we go. All right, everybody, say cheese. Woo! You guys don't say cheese here. How about Gainsight? 1, 2, 3. Gainsight! Hey! Thank you, everybody.
Cool. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Oh, by the way, right now there's a break going on. You have about 15 more minutes until the next session kicks off at 3 o'clock. So if you want to grab coffee or a snack, you can find that outside. Thank you.